Alrighty, welcome to my first video of this workflow, going through all of my gear, and then unfortunately I can't do the actual imaging video because it's going to be quite cloudy for the next few days, so I won't be able to get this done. So this video is just going to be all about going through all my gear, how it works, what it does, me setting it up, and yeah. So this is my current setup. You can only probably see half of it, but I'm currently using the Skywatcher AZ-EQ5 mount and the Sharpstar AL90R 90mm refractor telescope and a ZWO ASI 533MC Pro camera. Now I'm going to go through each of these items of equipment bit by bit and go a bit more into detail about them. And first of all is the mount. It is a go-to tracking mount. That means I can type in an object that I want to move to and it will move to it for me. It has got two modes, which are the Alt-Az mode, which is the left, right, up and down mode, and the equatorial tracking mode, which means I polar align to the south celestial pole and it will then rotate on the equatorial axis. It is from Skywatcher, who is, I would say, one of the main mount dealers in the current astronomy world. Ioptron has got some very cool new mounts coming out that are redesigned to make the mount a lot more stable and everything. So I've had this mount for about 6 or 9 months now. I was using the Skywatcher Star Adventurer 2i pack before I got this mount, which is an equatorial mount, but it doesn't have the go-to feature. It does track, but I can't get it to point somewhere. So this was a big upgrade, and it allowed me to use go-to, plate solving, guiding, carry heavier payloads and everything like that. So I love this mount at the moment. It's probably the best mount I've ever used, not that I've used many. So yeah, moving on to the next piece of my equipment is the Sharpstar AL90R refractor telescope. This is a very new addition to my rig, as I only received it a couple of weeks ago. I've got a few images from it, and from what I've seen of those images, these are amazing. This telescope is amazing. So first of all, it is a 90mm refractor, meaning the diameter of it is 90mm. It is a triplet refractor, which means there are 3 optical pieces, one about here, one here, and one here. And that means that the light is actually bent before it hits the sensor, meaning that it can magnify and correct itself from all the warping of the light. It's got a really nice focuser over here, really smooth. It's got a 10:1 ratio part on the edge, which means I can get a really fine focus if I need it, which is very often. I've got a field flattener on it from Sharpstar. It's the 2.5-inch field flattener for large telescopes, and I'm kind of looking for a reducer, as the telescope is 600mm of focal length and 90mm aperture, which means it is a focal ratio of 6.67. So on the slower side, but a speed I can deal with. So if I was to get a 0.8 reducer, it'd bring it down to about 450mm. The next thing on the list is the ZWO ASI 533MC Pro camera. Now this is also a relatively new addition to this rig, and as I got it probably 2 months ago. It is a dedicated astronomy camera that has a cooling system in the back and is a CMOS sensor. It is almost a perfect fit for this telescope because the pixel size is 3.75 microns big, which means that the actual sampling for this telescope with that camera is almost perfect. It's almost designed for a telescope like this. It's a 3006 by 3006 pixel sensor, so it's actually a square sensor, which means that framing my targets is actually a lot easier because I don't need to worry about the rotation of the framing really, and I can just set it and it's got good to go for the next couple of months and I don't need to take it off. So that's the main items of this rig here, and I've got a couple of accessories such as this guide scope here and a couple of other things like a box that I use to protect my laptop when imaging, and I'll go through them in a bit more detail. Alrighty, some of these accessories include this torch. Now this is a generic torch from Aldi, I believe, and it has got a white light function, a brighter one, and off. It also has a bunch of other functions such as another white light or a red light. Now this is my favorite light because our eyes can adjust to the dark after a certain amount of time, but if we then turn on another white light, that adjustment process will have to restart. Now if I'm using a red light, my eyes can actually see in the better with the red light on, and it won't affect as much my eyesight in the dark. So that's one of my amazing accessories that I use. The next one is my guiding setup. Now this is my current guiding setup, and it is simply just a camera and guide scope. Now these are two low quality cameras compared to other cameras. So this is a S for Bony 50mm guide scope and a ZWO ASI 120mm Mini. So 50mm guide scope, 194mm of focal length, so perfect for guiding up to about 1000mm of focal length on my main camera or main telescope. This is a guide camera, probably the most popular one for beginners and intermediate images. It just will sit on this telescope here and look at a star and monitor its movement and tell the mount where to move to adjust to the star's movement, because the tracking of the mount is not always going to be completely perfect. The next accessory is a good power cable. Now this is the one I use. I believe it's about 20 meters and it is very heavy. It's a heavy duty one that will last me for a long while now. And it has got enough length that it can go from inside power out to the backyard where I can image from. It means that I don't have to rely on a battery being charged constantly, and I can just have secure battery power if I want to image all night long, or I want to do other things that will drain that would drain a battery's power faster than I will use power from the external. The next accessory is a box. Now this box has got two uses. It carries all my gear outside, so I don't have to do 10 or 15 trips, because it has got a set of Allen keys, my dew heater, an intervalometer, a power board, all my cables in it. I often put my telescope and camera in there, and sometimes even the power. Also the laptop will go in there. But after everything is actually taken out, I sit the box up like that on a chair and pop the laptop in the center of it. This means that in winter primarily, when there's a lot of moisture in the air, the moisture will actually settle on the top of the container rather than on the keyboard and screen of my laptop. It also, if I take a towel outside, I can drape it over, which reduces the amount of light getting out from the laptop. Also, the towel can slightly help with the temperature inside the box. I found that if my computer gets probably about below -10, which it can do on some very cold nights here, it starts to slow down and just freeze up. So if I bring outside a towel and this box, and sometimes even a hot water bottle, it can reduce that, it can increase that temperature inside the box, which means that I don't have to restart all my imaging again after I've charged up the laptop, restarted it, and yeah. So that's another amazing accessory. The next one is a set of good Allen keys. Now, theoretically, astronomy should have a standard size of Allen key sizes. Now, for most of the Skywatcher brand, there is a standard. For Celestron, for ZWO, for all of those, there is a standard size. But there are a couple of outliers that just make the astronomy community slightly frustrated with them, but that's alright. And they're just an odd size. Some are metric, some are imperial, and it's just a slightly odd size to do for a telescope. The next accessory is a dew heater. Now, this will just wrap around the lens or the top of the telescope once the dew shield is out. Strap it on, plug it into a USB port, either on my computer or in the power board that I use, and just hit go. And that will just make sure that the front of the lens is warm enough that in winter or the middle of summer, the dew will actually not settle on the front and it will just evaporate off it. This will only make the lenses of the telescope 1 or 2 degrees different compared to the outside air, but that 1 or 2 degrees can make a huge difference in terms of how quickly your lens fogs up and how long you can image for in the winter. This especially helps when the mount is pointing directly up, because there will be more exposure to the open air, such like that. If you're shooting an object over here, there is the possibility of dew, but it's just a bit harder for it to get onto the lens. The next accessory for a DSLR is a intervalometer. I use this intervalometer. I just got it off eBay. I think it was about $25. And this actually allows me to, once I've set up the camera and done everything, I generally use this with the Star Adventurer. Once I've set everything up, I can just work out the long exposure times that I want, the intervals between them, and the number of images I'd like it to take. I can then go inside and either sleep or relax or do anything else that I'd like to do. This means that I don't have to stand outside, clicking the take a photo button and then holding the shutter to make it go for a longer exposure, such as 2-minute or 3-minute images. So this can also be used as a time-lapse accessory, because you can just set the amount of images that you'd like to do and the interval, and it works very well just to do a time-lapse of like a beach or a sporting event or something like that. So that is another great accessory that I use. The last main accessory that I use is a USB port splitter. Now this just plugs into my laptop into a USB port, but it actually splits those ports, that single port, into 4 different ones. This means that I generally plug in my dew heater, camera, guider and mount into the same USB port, which means that I don't have to use as many different sides of the laptop I just don't need to use as many sides. So this is my go-to one. I don't know where I got it from. I think it was pretty cheap. It does supply power to these ones, because a camera such as the ASI 120mm does not have a power supply to it, and it just relies on the power coming from the laptop. So if you've got a power or a USB splitter, but it does not run power. That will be problematic when you're using a guiding camera or a planetary camera. Well, that's basically it, me going through my gear. I hope you enjoyed this video of me just breaking down a bit of my gear, and hope it made a bit more sense rather than just you seeing the images of my gear and going, what does this part do and what does that part do and why is this so big and everything like that. So look out for the upcoming processing video that will be out pretty soon, and hopefully you can learn something there as well. It will just be a video of me going through my workflow from having all of my images in a file, stacking them in a Deep Sky Stacker, going in PixInsight and then Photoshop, and then just finishing touches in Photoshop. So thank you for watching, and look out for the next video. Thanks!